My fiancée tried to sneak her family into my house while I was out of town, claiming they would only stay a few days. I came back early and kicked them all out. I was heading out of town for a work trip. Nothing unusual, just a short 4-day stint. My fiancée, Emma, and I had talked about it the week before, and everything seemed normal. She'd even joked about having the whole house to herself, saying she'd binge some Netflix shows I didn't care for and order way too much takeout. Typical Emma stuff. But looking back now, there were signs. Small things I didn't even notice at the time but are practically screaming at me now. The night before I left, Emma was acting weird. Not crazy weird, but she wasn't her usual chill self. She kept bringing up our spare bedrooms during casual conversation. At first, it was a passing comment about how we should reorganize one of the rooms, something about clearing out my old gym equipment and turning it into a proper guest room. Then later, she mentioned how nice it was to have extra space just in case. I remember laughing it off, saying, "Who are we expecting? Royalty?" She didn't laugh back. Instead, she gave me this tight smile and said, "You never know." At the time, I didn't think much of it. Emma's family can be a lot, and she knows I've always been a bit protective of my space. I bought this house 2 years before we even met, and while she's living here now, I've made it clear that I value boundaries, especially when it comes to her parents. To put it bluntly, they're the kind of people who push limits. Her dad's the type who'll borrow your tools and then forget to return them. Her mom once asked if I'd co-sign a car loan for her, even though I'd only met her twice at that point. And her younger brother? Don't even get me started. He's 24, jobless, and seems to think mooching off people is his life's calling. So yeah, I love Emma, but her family? Not so much. 2 days into my trip, Emma called me, and right away, something felt off. Her voice was weirdly chipper, like overly cheerful. She's usually pretty straightforward, so the sudden shift caught me off guard. She told me she'd had her parents over for dinner since they were in the area. This struck me as odd for a few reasons. First, her parents live 2 hours away. They're not the just in the neighborhood type. Second, Emma knows how I feel about hosting her family without a heads up. I don't want to sound like a controlling jerk, but it's my house, and I think it's fair to expect at least a conversation before people drop by. I asked her how dinner went, and she gave me this vague answer about how it was nice and they didn't stay long. Then, she quickly changed the subject, asking about my trip and whether I'd had time to check out the hotel gym. At this point, I had a weird feeling in my gut, but I didn't want to make a thing out of it. I mean, maybe her parents really were just passing through, and I was overthinking it. The real alarm bells started ringing on day 3. I was sitting in a meeting when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my next-door neighbor, Karen. She's an older lady who watches everything that happens on the street. The message read, "Hey, just checking in. I've noticed a lot of cars at your house the past couple of days. Everything okay?" I froze. A lot of cars? What did that even mean? Emma had only mentioned her parents coming for dinner, so who else could be at the house? I texted Karen back, asking for specifics, and she replied, "I think there are 3 or 4 cars parked out front now. Saw some people unloading bags yesterday." Bags? What bags? I immediately called Emma. She picked up after a couple of rings and sounded breathless, like I'd caught her in the middle of something. I asked her straight up, "Hey, Karen said there are a bunch of cars at the house. What's going on?" There was a pause, a long one. Then she said, "Oh, that's just my brother and his girlfriend. They're helping me clean out the garage." Now here's the thing. Emma's brother is not the kind of person who helps anyone with anything. If he's at my house, it's not because he's suddenly decided to be useful. But I didn't push. Not yet. I told myself I was probably just being paranoid and that everything was fine. By the next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Karen's text kept replaying in my head, and the more I thought about Emma's tone on the phone, the more unsettled I felt. I decided to cut my trip short. My meetings were mostly wrapped up, and I figured I could handle the rest remotely. I didn't tell Emma I was coming home early. I wanted to see for myself what was going on. When I pulled into the driveway late that night, I noticed 2 unfamiliar cars parked out front. The lights were on inside the house, and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. I walked in through the front door, suitcase in hand, and what I saw stopped me in my tracks. Emma's parents were sitting on my couch, laughing at something on the TV. Her younger brother was sprawled out in one of my recliners, holding a beer. And near the front hallway? A stack of suitcases and duffel bags. I must have stood there for a full 5 seconds before Emma noticed me. Her face went pale, and she stammered, You're home early." I dropped my bag and looked her dead in the eye. What the hell is going on here? Update. I thought walking into my house and seeing my fiancée's entire family camped out in my living room was the shock of the year. Turns out, that was just the tip of the iceberg. Things have gone from bad to worse, and honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how we got here. When I left off, I had just walked through the door, surprised Emma and her family, and demanded to know what the hell was going on. Let me tell you, the answers I got only made things more infuriating, and a lot more complicated. Let me set the scene. I'm standing there in the doorway, still in my work clothes, suitcase in hand, staring at 4 people who look like they've been living in my house for days. Emma's parents are on the couch like they're watching a movie in their own home. Her dad's got his feet up on my coffee table, while her mom's flipping through one of the magazines I keep in the guest bathroom. Emma's younger brother, let's call him Jake, is in one of my recliners, beer in hand, looking so comfortable it's like he's been planted there for weeks. And the luggage. Oh, the luggage. Stacks of it near the front door, tucked behind the couch, and even spilling into the hallway toward the spare bedrooms. This wasn't just a casual visit, they'd moved in. Emma stood there frozen for a second, like she'd been caught stealing. "You're home early," she said, her voice higher pitched than usual. "No kidding," I said. "What's going on?" She stammered something about how her parents' house was unlivable right now because of unexpected construction issues, and how she thought it would be fine for them to stay at our house for just a few days. I didn't respond right away. I was too busy trying to process how her definition of fine included not asking me or even giving me a heads up. And honestly, I wasn't buying the construction excuse. Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she'd been preparing for this confrontation and was waiting for the chance to justify herself. As if Emma's explanation wasn't enough to rile me up, her dad decided to chime in. "Look man," he said, gesturing around like he was surveying his new kingdom. "We're family now, right? And family helps each other out. It's just temporary. What's the big deal?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This guy was sitting on my couch, acting like he was doing me a favor by gracing my house with his presence. "It's a big deal," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, because no one asked me. "This is my house. You don't just show up unannounced and start unpacking your bags." Her mom cut in at this point, giving me one of those fake, overly sweet smiles. "Oh honey, we didn't want to bother you on your trip. Emma said it would be okay. She said you'd understand." I turned to Emma, my patience wearing thin. "Did you say that?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she mumbled something about not wanting to stress me out while I was out of town. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some last-minute emergency. Emma knew I wouldn't be okay with this, so she waited until I was gone to make her move. By this point, I was done playing nice. I told everyone to sit down because we needed to have a serious talk. "Let's cut the crap," I said. "How long were you planning on staying here?" Emma tried to deflect again, saying it was just for a few days. But Jake snorted, an actual snort, and muttered, "More like a few weeks." Her parents glared at him, but it was too late. The truth was out. "A few weeks," I repeated, staring directly at Emma. "You told me this was just for dinner the other night. Now it's a few days. And apparently, it's actually weeks." Emma finally cracked under the pressure. She admitted that her parents' house wasn't just under construction, it was undergoing major renovations that wouldn't be finished for at least 2 months. Her parents had convinced her that staying at my house was the easiest solution, and she'd gone along with it, thinking I'd come around once I saw how harmless it was. "I didn't think you'd mind," she said, as if that made everything better. "You didn't think I'd mind?" I said, my voice rising. "Emma, you know how I feel about boundaries. You know how I feel about your parents pushing limits, and you thought I'd be okay with this?" "They had nowhere else to go," she said, getting defensive. "What was I supposed to do? Say no?" "Yes," I shot back. "Or at least ask me first." Her parents looked indignant, like they couldn't believe I was standing up to them. Jake just looked amused, which only made me angrier. Her dad finally stood up and said, "You're being ridiculous. This is Emma's house too, isn't it? She has a say in who stays here." That's when I lost it. "No, actually she doesn't," I said. "This is my house. I bought it, I pay for it. And if you think you can waltz in here without my permission and act like you own the place, you've got another thing coming." Her mom gasped like I'd just insulted her entire lineage. "I can't believe you're being so selfish," she said. "This is family. Family helps each other." "That's funny," I said. "Because helping family usually starts with asking for permission, not sneaking around behind someone's back." Eventually, I told everyone they needed to leave. I didn't care if they had to stay in a hotel, with friends, or in their half-finished house. This wasn't my problem to solve. Emma begged me to reconsider, saying it would tear her family apart if I forced them out, but I wasn't budging. I told her we'd talk about our relationship later, but for now, her family needed to go. They didn't take it well. Her dad muttered something under his breath about me being a control freak, and Jake rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. By the time I went to bed, they were packing up their things, and Emma wasn't speaking to me. I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that I'd taken a stand, but dread about what this meant for our future. Final update. I want to start by thanking everyone who commented on my last 2 posts. The advice, support, and even the tough love really helped me navigate this mess. I didn't expect things to get as complicated as they did, but I finally got some resolution, though not the kind I was hoping for. When I kicked Emma's family out, I thought that would be the end of the drama. After her family packed up and left that night, the house was eerily quiet. Emma didn't say a word to me before going to bed, and honestly, I didn't try to start a conversation. I needed space to process everything. The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, and tried to go about my normal routine. But the house felt different. It wasn't just the absence of her family, it was the weight of everything that had been said and unsaid. Emma came downstairs eventually, but she didn't look at me. She poured herself some coffee, sat at the table, and scrolled on her phone like nothing had happened. The silence was suffocating. Finally, I broke it. "We need to talk." She sighed, set her phone down, and gave me this look like I was the one inconveniencing her. "About what?" she said. "About what happened," I said. "About why you thought it was okay to let your family move into my house without asking me. About what that means for us moving forward." Her response? "I already explained it. They had nowhere else to go. I didn't think it would be a big deal." That was her line. Over and over. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I tried to stay calm and explain, again, why her actions felt like such a massive betrayal of trust. I told her that this wasn't about being selfish or not wanting to help her family. It was about boundaries, respect, and communication. But instead of owning up to anything, Emma doubled down. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," she said, rolling her eyes. "It was just a temporary thing. Why are you acting like I sold your house out from under you?" The way she dismissed my feelings lit a fire in me. I couldn't believe she still didn't get it. "Emma, this isn't about the house. This is about you lying to me. You made a decision behind my back because you knew I wouldn't be okay with it. That's the problem." And then came the kicker. "Well, maybe the problem is that you're too controlling," she said. I was stunned. Controlling? This was the same person who didn't think twice about inviting 4 people to live in my house without consulting me, and now I was the controlling one? I told her, if expecting basic communication in a relationship makes me controlling, then I guess I'm guilty. But this isn't something I can just sweep under the rug, Emma. You crossed a line. She scoffed and said, "So what, are you gonna call off the engagement over this?" I didn't answer right away, and that pause must have said everything, because her face changed. After that conversation, things spiraled. Emma spent the next few days swinging between icy silence and full-on guilt tripping. She'd say things like, "I can't believe you're willing to throw away 3 years over something so small." Or, "Do you even love me, or was this just convenient for you?" The thing is, I did love her. That's what made this so hard. But the more I thought about what she'd done, and her refusal to take any responsibility for it, the more I realized this wasn't a one-off mistake. This was a pattern. Looking back, there were smaller red flags I'd ignored. The way she'd downplay my concerns about her family's behavior, saying I was too sensitive. The times she'd make decisions for both of us without asking, assuming I'd just go along with it. The subtle pressure to put her needs, and her family's needs, above my own, even when it came at my expense. This wasn't just about her family moving in. It was about trust. And once that trust was broken, I couldn't unsee the cracks in our relationship. The final straw came a few days later. I was sitting in my home office, trying to work, when Emma came in and said she wanted to clear the air. I thought maybe she was finally ready to take accountability, but nope. Instead, she tried to pitch me on the idea of letting her parents come back, this time with conditions. She said we could set rules to make sure they didn't overstay their welcome, like agreeing on an end date or limiting how much they used the common areas. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. "Emma, you're missing the point. This isn't about setting rules. This is about the fact that you betrayed my trust. How can we even talk about your family staying here when we haven't fixed the bigger issue?" And then she said something I'll never forget. "Well, maybe if you'd just try harder to get along with them, this wouldn't be such a big deal." That was it. That was the moment I knew we were done. That night, I sat Emma down and told her I couldn't do this anymore. I explained that it wasn't just about her family, it was about the way she handled the entire situation, from the lying to the guilt trips to the complete lack of accountability. At first, she tried to argue, saying I was overreacting, and that no relationship is perfect. But when she realized I wasn't budging, she got angry. "Fine," she said. "If you want to throw this all away, that's on you. Don't come crying to me when you realize you've made the biggest mistake of your life." She packed a bag and left that night. I don't know where she went, probably to her parents' house, but I haven't heard from her since. It's been a week since Emma moved out, and I'm still processing everything. On one hand, I feel a sense of relief. Like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. On the other hand, there's this lingering sadness, this sense of loss for the future I thought we were building together. Thanks again to everyone who followed this journey and offered their support. I never thought I'd be the kind of person airing my dirty laundry on Reddit, but honestly, it's been cathartic. So yeah. That's it. The engagement's off, Emma's gone, and my house is finally my own again. It's not the ending I wanted, but it's the one I needed.